Right, just to show you how to rearrange some formulas. So let's say that we have the formula t equals p plus 3. So when we're asked to rearrange a formula, we're asked to make something the subject of the equation that isn't the subject at that point. So at the moment, the subject of the equation is t, all right, because t is written in terms of p plus 3. So you have to do something to p and 3 to get t. So if we want p to be the subject, then we must get p on its own. So at the moment, p has plus 3 to it. Now, as we're dealing with equation, providing we do the same thing to both sides, then the equation stays balanced. So I have subtracted 3 from both sides. So 3 and minus 3 is 0. And so we're left with p equals t minus 3. Now in maths we can read right to left or left to right, it doesn't make any difference. So you'll see that I've put the p here and the t minus 3 on the other side, because we like to have our subject on the left hand side. So I've made p the subject then simply by taking away 3. Now when we move things around over the equal sign, you should know from what you've been taught that the operation that we move will do the opposite thing on the other side. So what was plus 3 became minus 3. Suppose I had 3t equaled p, and I wanted p to be the subject of the equation. Then I would need to move the 3 to the other side. Now, the opposite of multiplying by 3 is divide by 3. Another way of looking at that is that you could say that I divided both sides by 3, and that it disappeared here because I deliberately set it up to do so. So 3 divided by 3 on the left leaves me with t, and on the right it leaves me with p over 3. And when you're used to this, we tend to talk about just moving it to the other side, so it does the opposite thing. Now, let's move on and look at, say, a combination of operations. So let's say 3t plus 5 equals s, and we want t to be the subject. So t is multiplied by 3, and then it has 5 added to it. You might be tempted to move the 3 to the other side, but the 3 is not affecting the 5. So if I divided by 3 on this side, it would have been wrong because the 5 has not been multiplied by 3. So you kind of have to undo what's done in reverse. The first thing that's done to t is multiplied by 3, and the last thing is add 5. So we want to remove that 5, so we'll take 5 off both sides. Now, I'm not going to write it out like it did in the first example because it's really unnecessary, but you can see my 5 has moved to the other side and does the opposite thing. Right, so plus 5 becomes minus 5. Now we have 3t equals s minus 5. So to undo the times by 3, we divide by 3, and now we have t as the subject of the equation. So we'll move on to something now, say with brackets. 3x plus 5 equals y. So how am I going to do this? Well, this time the first thing that was done to x was to add 5 and then multiply by 3. So we'll undo the 3 first. So the 3 is multiplying x plus 5. So we take it across to the other side, and it divides our y by 3. And now we want to remove the plus 5. So to get x on its own, we must take the 5 off both sides. So it goes across to the other side, and we have x equals y over 3 minus 5. So these are most of the types of things that will come up in GCSE have been covered. I'll just show you, perhaps, if we were squaring, how we would cope with that. So say we've got t squared minus 3 equals s. So you'll see that I will move the 3 across, as I've done in the previous examples, and it becomes a plus. Now to undo squaring, we do a square root on both sides. So if we square rooted t squared, right, the square root of t squared equals t. But we must do the same thing to both sides. So we have that there. Finally, we'll show you how to deal with a fraction. Suppose we had 5 over s equal to t, and I want to make s the subject. Then the s can go to the opposite side. 5 equals s times t. and then the t can come underneath the 5 as a divider. 5 over t equals s. You might have noticed that this can be done very quickly simply by swapping over the s and the t. And sometimes it's not a bad idea, if you're not quite sure of your move, is to check with some numbers. So if I did 16 divided by 2 is 8, would the rule still hold if I swap the 2 and the 8 around? So 16 over 8 equals 2, and yes, the answer is yes, it would. So it is perfectly alright if we have, say, x over y equals z, and I want to make y the subject, to swap the y and the z over, and now I have y as the subject. So changing the subject of an equation, and I've covered most of the things that could come up in your GCSE, so hopefully now you understand.